Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Welcome. This is Local History Guild. I'm Marina Dawn Wells. I'm Assistant Curator of History and Culture here at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Local History Guild is our quarterly free online Zoom event where we discuss art, history, science, and culture, and other items related to the museum's mission and our collection and the surrounding region here in Old Dartmouth. So this March for our quarterly event, this is being held at a time when the U.S. is marking the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War of American independence, and local historians, they are delving into this history of revolution in Old Dartmouth. Different approaches reveal stories related to this era of the 1770s, 1780s-ish in the area of Old Dartmouth, Westport, Dartmouth, New Bedford, Fairhaven, Acushnet. So tonight we'll hear about some of the projects taking place locally and the stories they've uncovered. We have really, really wonderful speakers. We are so grateful to have all four of you. We'll start with Jonathan Lane, who is the Executive Director of Revolution 250. And we will also hear from Diane Gilbert, who's president of the Dartmouth Heritage Preservation Trust. Then we'll hear from Jenny O'Neill, who's executive director of the Westport Historical Society. And last but certainly not least is Judy Lund, Curator Emerita of the New Bedford Whaling Museum and local historian. So thank you all so much for being here and sharing your time, energy, and expertise with us. I hope tonight's discussion is a lively one. It will be recorded and posted on YouTube for later viewing. And we'll have all four of the speakers speak in succession and followed by a Q&A. So if you have questions, please wait until the end to ask them. You can ask them live to our speakers, and hopefully some of the speakers will have questions for each other. So without further ado, thank you again for being here, and we can start with Jonathan.
Well, delighted to be here, folks. I'm Jonathan Lane, Executive Director of Revolution 250. We are a consortium of more than 75 organizations who have been working on the 250th since 2015 was our first event. I joined the team in 2017, and team is a very broad word, covers a lot of sins, but I'm just going to give you some of the lessons that we've learned over the last 7, 8 years, and what we're sort of taking away from this commemoration. And certainly, I think one of the things we're taking away is something that is being done tonight. Well, a couple of things. So obviously, COVID has forced a lot of us into a posture of using more electronic means of gathering rather than in-person hostings. I regret that terribly because I'm an in-person guy. I love to feed off the energy of a room and to meet people and I'm terrible with faces, so trying to put faces with names is always useful to me. But at the same time, as I'm sure many of you know and have found out in your own work and lives, it really has allowed us to expand the reach of our message. And so Revolution 250, for instance, we have a weekly podcast. And when we started out during COVID, we expected that it would just reach a couple of friends in the neighborhood or mostly people around Massachusetts, maybe New England if we were lucky. And in fact, we're heard in over 120 countries around the world, and we've been downloaded more than 250,000 times by people. Each podcast is probably getting about 300-400 downloads, over its lifetime. And we've had some amazing scholars, some amazing museum professionals, public historians, educators. It's really been an opportunity to look at how all of these fields are coming together in this 250th moment. So I'm not going to go through all of my slides. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily speak to all of my slides here because it is a longer preservation, but I do want to just start here with this sorry friends, the revolution began here, moments that changed the world. I mean, since I took this job and I've been working with people on the national stage and in the regional arena as well, we have really had to stand our ground about Massachusetts' role in the American Revolution. We have people from South Carolina who have said publicly that liberty began in South Carolina, which of course is preposterous. We've, obviously Philadelphia wants to be known as the people who started the revolution, started the independence movement instead of, being known as the people who just filled out the paperwork. So we've really had to do a little elbowing in the public space to remind people that you don't get to the Declaration of Independence without experiencing what the people of Massachusetts experienced 250 years ago. We're going to talk about a number of things, but obviously, we want to talk about networking, and it's not just your network, it's about the networks of your networks. And so, building a map. So an example of that is when we were doing the 250th anniversary of the Tea Party, we reached out across the nation and eventually across the world, asking people to send us tea to dump into Boston Harbor during the reenactment. And in 1 and 2 ounce increments, which is the vast majority of the tea we received, we gathered over 4,000 pounds of tea from 14 countries, every state and territory in the United States. It really was a remarkable experience, and it was about leveraging those networks. Revolution 250 itself is a network. As I said, we're more than 75 organizations. And we were eager to partner with anybody and everybody who came to the table as an honest partner. All of our events have in large part been about building partnerships. When we did the Battle of Bunker Hill events in Charlestown, there were more than 34 organizations who were involved in putting together the plan for that 10-day commemoration. When we did the Battle of Bunker Hill, as you can see, there's a piece of the what became the banner. Again, it's 20 organizations coming together to try and not just put the event on, but to fund the event as well. As we all know, in the historical and cultural space, funding can be lacking sometimes, to be sure. But one of the things that I'm excited about is two things. First of all, this commemoration, it's not necessarily one sort of top-down commemorative program or project governed by a state or even a national entity. And it is regrettable we haven't had those resources available to us in large measure. But at the same time, I think it's built a much more Massachusetts commemorative program. So we, it's this moment of sort of e pluribus unum, right? We've gotten one commemoration out of dozens and dozens and dozens of projects and programs, using dozens and dozens and dozens of partners. And as you can see on the slide here, there isn't a form of commemorative expression we haven't done in this time period. We've done, the traditional sort of reenactments and parades and exhibits and, fireworks and conferences and, all of it. We've done all the things. Obviously there's some new features. The drone show is kind of a new feature. These street signs are a new feature. The pop-up museum is a really interesting concept too. This is done by people down on the South Shore, and they brought organizations together on one weekend, and some of them brought artifacts, others brought educational programming, but it was the opportunity for local historical societies to come together on one weekend in one space and allow people from the various communities to come and sort of interact in that time and space as well. It was really effective and a wonderful opportunity. Projections are fairly new too. I don't know if you know the phrase, the nom de plume, silence do good, which Ben Franklin used in the early 18th century to write articles for his brother's newspaper. Well, there is a digital silence do good out there who is now doing digital projections all across Boston at various times and events. And they're really thoughtful and really clever. And it's, again, meant to help bridge that ancient, I shouldn't say ancient, but, the 18th century, public space pamphleteering or broadsides with the modern technological opportunity of projecting onto historic sites and historic buildings. Obviously, we wanted to hit all the big opportunities. The 250th of the massacre and the Tea Party, Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill, Chelsea Creek. We wanted to hit all of those marks. The 4th of July at the Hat Shell, of course, and we did. But really, the heart and soul of this commemoration has been the smaller, more intimate opportunities in communities all across Massachusetts. The power of spectacle is still there. When we did the Tea Party, we expected 4,000 to 5,000 people to turn out, and we got over 15,000 people to turn out on a December evening for the Tea Party. And the crowds have only grown since then. This is just some numbers from the grand scale reenactment on December 16th, 2023. The number I want to draw your attention to is the 1.2 billion plus media impressions from around the world. And that's through all types of media. So social media, TV, print media, all of the things, was really an amazing way to get people to talk about this one particular moment in time. And some of the ancillary, like the Phyllis Wheatley project, which came out of that, because of course her book arrives on the tea ships in December of 1773. This is statistics from Lexington 250, bunches of people. I mean, there were bunches and bunches of people, and this is just really since this PR firm came on board. So they missed all, the whole run up to Lexington and Concord. And really, for the first time, Lexington, Concord, Lincoln, and Arlington really tried to work together. And that's major improvement from past anniversaries when, there was kind of an adversarial, who fired the first shot, right? The shot heard around the world is the phrase that everybody knows. But what does that mean, right? Is it the first shot, or is it the shot heard around the world in Concord? So but they've overcome a lot of that. Like many things, it didn't quite play out the way they expected it to, but you roll with the necessary changes. Knox Trail, we're just wrapping up now. Evacuation Day is a week from today. We hope to see you there. Thousands of people I know are going to be there. The procession is going to be amazing. It is on a Tuesday, so work tends to get in the way. But branding is important. That's one of the things I wanted to showcase this for, is we did for Knox and Evacuation Day, we did kind of lean into the Revolution 250 palette a little bit more than some people may have liked. But people respond to it. And, understanding what your community hopes to see is something to keep in back of your mind. Not that you don't want to push them in a new direction or to teach them something new. But it is good to remember that sometimes the obvious, comfortable choices can be important as well. So these are this bottom left picture down here is on a private farm in Alford, Massachusetts. So if you haven't heard of Alford, it's right on the New York border. And it's the year-round population is 428. This is about half the town's annual population coming out to this event. And a number of these people are from New York, from Hillsdale, New York, because we were doing a 2-state commemoration right there in the middle of that field. So these are just more Knox 250 events just because it's new. I do want to just touch base quickly on this Declaration of Independence, because this is another way that communities have started getting involved, which is by taking John Adams' advice and looking at town records. Now, everybody knows the Declaration of Independence was, it was approved on July 2nd, but nobody celebrates that. July 4th is what's on the paperwork. July 8th, there is going to be a national reading of the Declaration of Independence, because that's the 250th anniversary of the first time the Declaration was read. And the 18th of July is when it arrived in Massachusetts. And there's a number of towns that are working on 18th of July events around the Declaration of Independence. And of course, it was ordered to be read not only from the pulpit, but to be handwritten into town meeting records. And so many of your towns probably have a town clerk written copy of the Declaration of Independence in your town records. And so we've been encouraging towns to go through, find these, photograph them, digitize them. And these are just some of the other Declaration of Independence programs that people are working on. Coming up, we've got some new exhibits. We've got a number of programs that are happening. Treaty Day in Watertown, the first treaty signed by the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts on behalf of the Continental Congress. So it's recognized as America's first treaty with the Maliseet and Micmac people. That'll be commemorated on July 18 in Watertown, Massachusetts. And then, of course, there's all kinds of America 250 projects and programs, new exhibits at UVA, the National Archives, the Pew Center, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, people have probably been hearing about the Freedom Plane Tour recently, which I'm not going to go into. They chose sites in states that didn't have presidential libraries. So if you're wondering why it's not coming to Massachusetts, it's because we have a presidential library and hopefully 2 presidential libraries soon. And that's what I got for you today. Look forward to your questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And Diane, you are all set to go. Looks great.
Whoops, sorry. I have to get rid of something here. Well, first I want to say I'm thrilled to be here to tell folks who are listening a little bit about the Aiken family, and also just to talk about the fact that the Aikens were involved in the Revolution. And so this is a perfect moment for us to continue to feature the importance of the 1762 Aiken House, which we call the little house with a big story to tell. And it's a witness site to the American Revolution. And I have to give credit to Jonathan, because when I first learned about Revolution 250 and I emailed Jonathan, I asked him if the Aiken House is a witness site. So from that point on, we became very good collaborators, which I'm thrilled about. And why is it a witness site? I won't read all of this to you, but I will say it was built 2 years into the reign of King George III, and it has survived before the Revolution, during and after the Revolution, all the way to the present day. And I will also add that the Aikens acted as a family to defend their economic independence. And even before the conflict escalated, which for them was most importantly the British raid of 1778. So we can't lose sight of that momentous event. So I like to say that I say we because I'm so immersed in the Aiken family that it's hard for me to separate myself. And as a matter of fact, I did contact the Aiken descendants and shared with them that we were doing this event today. So I got a thumbs up from them about this. So why is this important? We went from King George to George Washington, and the Aikens were very political, as it turned out. And they did have connections to Ben Franklin and John Adams, among others. So imagine perhaps during the Revolution that the Aiken House existed, and just imagine the people that were there during that time. So I think this is a very sweet photo, have no idea how old it is, who took the photograph, but use your imagination about this property. So let's talk about what's behind the curtain of these commemorations that Jonathan so eloquently discussed. For me, the importance of this research, which continues and will continue for a long time, and I think I speak for others of us who care about history and research, is that we always seek an intimate knowledge of Dartmouth's freeholders and other inhabitants, especially for me, to try to discern their humanity. That's what I'm really after. So we can only speculate and try to connect the dots of these people and their relationships to the land and events. So in this presentation, I will hit upon genealogy, land deeds, town meeting minutes, Quaker meeting minutes, and census data. Just briefly, because I am always interested in sharing the process of historical research. And this was my process in getting to know the Aikens. So here's the genealogy. It's a lot of data, and that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as the Aikens are concerned. So I like to start with John Aiken because his parents went from Scotland to Portsmouth, Rhode Island. But John Aiken is the one who settled in Old Dartmouth. And there are many people to learn about, but I'm going to particularly focus on James Aiken, Benjamin Aiken, and Elihu Aiken. So with Benjamin, he was a prominent figure in the Revolution. James, the eldest brother, was in partnership with Elihu Aiken as far as shipbuilding and other entrepreneurial businesses in Dartmouth Village. And then, of course, Elihu, who's my favorite, and he's the namesake of the Aiken House. But in particular, a good story is the one about his son, Jonathan. So I'll get into that. In looking at land deeds, and the reason I'm showing you these little snippets of research is to bring these people to life. We know they existed due to a variety of different records that are out there. And when you look at all the different records and you look at their names and you put it all together, then most assuredly, these people lived a life. So you can see here, Elihu Aiken, James Aiken, Benjamin Aiken, owning property in the town of Dartmouth. And then you have Dartmouth town meeting minutes that really exceptionally so bring these people to life. And I just wanted to show a sample of the Dartmouth town meeting minutes and the transcribed version here. And also give a salute to Jenny O'Neill, who's here with us tonight and will tell us more about the project in our own words. Then we have the Quaker meeting minutes. And what is intriguing to me about these meeting minutes, because they're accessible just like the town meeting minutes are, but you can dig deep into the lives of the various families, especially those Quakers who are featured in pages and pages of these meeting minutes. And I just want to focus in on John Aiken and point out that I believe this John Aiken, who is referenced in the Quaker meeting minutes, is Elihu's son. There are many other John Aikens, as you can imagine. And early on, they didn't have middle names, and the only way we can distinguish them is through their dates of being born and dying. And it is possible that James Aiken's son, John Aiken, could be the one in these Quaker meeting minutes that is mentioned here, but that just deserves a little bit more digging. So for the time being, I believe that this is Elihu's son. Now, what's relevant to the revolution in this case is that the Quakers did not, have cited him for bearing arms. And so you can see that this is a citation from the Quaker meeting minutes of March 16th, 1778. So this is around the time of the Revolution and preempting the British raid. So in 1779, after the British raid, he was disowned. But then, these people just don't let up and don't quit. And while they're busy establishing standards for the population, because it was predominantly Quaker, he just refused to give up his arms. But they still persisted to persuade him otherwise. And I know that this can't be seen, but there was also a John Aiken who finally gave the freedom of an Indian boy named Hazard in 1777. And he was the last one of the membership to free his slave. More data. Census records. Again, I just want to point out that the Aikens obviously figure prominently. So they were counted. They existed, they were counted. And there are many of them, as you can see: Timothy Aiken, Jonathan Aiken, Elihu Aiken, James, Richard, Jacob, John, William, Benjamin. And it's interesting to note, if you see Benjamin Aiken's entry on the far right side, it only shows one. Now, I believe it is the Benjamin Aiken that was the active politician of the time. And curious as to why only one person was counted. But to speculate, it could be that his wife had passed away, so he was alone at that time. 1800 census records. I just want to point out that they did things a little differently. Everything improves over time, record keeping especially. And so in this 1800 record, they did summaries of the populations living in Westport and Dartmouth. So that's what I wanted to show you there. But also they added more details of granularity of the types of people that they were counting. So it wasn't as simple as the 1790 census, This goes into free white males, free white females, and others, including those who are enslaved, which we didn't find as recorded. So yes, it's really all about the stories, and that's what is the most interesting. So the two people I want to end with is Benjamin Aiken. He was a tanner, courier, activist politician during the Revolution, Elihu's half brother, and he married 3 times. So I don't know when his Elizabeth Howland, who was his last wife, passed away. That wasn't available, but it might prove my point that before he died in 1802, given that census of 1790, he may have been alone at that time. Not alone in terms of being surrounded by his many family members, but alone in that household. And Jonathan Aiken, this is a very interesting story. Elihu's son, who was sailing from Dartmouth, captured by the British across the pond, then he escaped from the British on a British ship that landed him in France, where he became a prisoner. And what's significant about this is that he knew enough to write to Ben Franklin for help. And as it turned out, Ben Franklin and John Adams did work to seek his release from Granville prison in France. And he came back home. He returned to Dartmouth. He got married in 1782. He had 1 son. And then he passed away in 1799. But I think that's a fascinating story to elaborate on at some future time. So let's get back to Benjamin Aiken. One of the projects that I've signed up to do through Jenny's larger project of In Our Own Words about the transcription project is to try to get to know Benjamin Aiken a little better. He wasn't in the forefront of my mind when the Dartmouth Heritage Preservation Trust first got involved with the Aiken House. I was certainly fixated on the research that was done for Elihu Aiken and his family. But then, of course, Benjamin Aiken rose to the surface in my mind. So he was very influential. I wish that there was a painting of him, but I thought I'd throw in Sam Adams because he managed to send a letter to Samuel Adams as a representative of the Committee of Correspondence, basically affirming that the town of Dartmouth were all in for the common cause. And this is a transcript of Benjamin Aiken's letter to Samuel Adams. And there's another individual in here that I want to point out, which is William Tallman. And I just want to add that William Tallman is another person worth investigating because he appears in many places. So during the research that each of us individually and together have done, we usually come across a certain limited number of people in Dartmouth that were more active to form the government, to seek independence. And, so we have to, bring them to life as well. And here's a couple of excerpts from the town meeting minutes. and it shows Benjamin Aiken, because he, as I said before, he appears in a lot of different places. So this is a segment of the minutes from 1778. And so you see him here at the bottom as the Justice of the Peace. He had so many different roles, it's hard to keep up that he could do all of this. But then you see other people that may be familiar: Jonathan Slocum, Samuel Wilcox, Isaac Vinson. So this was in 1778. This one is 10 years after the British raid. So Benjamin Aiken is alive and well, as we already know, and still doing, serving in various capacities in the town of Dartmouth. And this is an example of him serving as town clerk. And it's just important to know that every year during town meeting, they would reappoint people. So people had 1-year terms. And so their responsibilities and their roles would change. But when you do that kind of rotation, then these people can multitask, because they can be a town clerk one day, Justice of the Peace another day, a surveyor yet another day. So it goes on. But these people are fascinating just for their roles during that time of the revolution. And 10 years later, they're still at it. So the British didn't succeed totally. So here's, we're back to Jonathan Aiken. There is a letter that he sent to Ben Franklin, as I mentioned earlier. So he does describe what he's been going through. 18 months ago, the ship from Bedford and Dartmouth bound to Bordeaux. And then he was captured and imprisoned. And he stayed in prison long enough to probably endure perhaps some horrendous treatment. But because of his connections with his uncle Benjamin, since Benjamin was involved in the provincial Congress, and also through his father, he was able to get freed. So this is just the source information of that documentation. And so he was freed. And as I said before, he came home and he lived a life in the town of Dartmouth. So finally, I just want to say, the interpretations continue, the research continues. There's still a lot more to uncover and discover. And we like to consider the Aiken House as, in a way, command central that epitomizes a house that was left standing during the Revolution. And we're fortunate to still have it today, and we as caretakers want it to continue for many more years to come. And we are gearing ourselves for the British raid commemorations, which will be coming up. And I guess that's all I have to say for the moment. But any questions, I'm happy to answer after this session is over.
Okay, so over to me. I am Jenny O'Neill. I'm the Executive Director of the Westport Historical Society. I'm going to talk briefly about our project in our own words. And I should start by saying have not been doing this project on my own. So I want to thank Diane for being so enthusiastic, and Judy, Richard Gifford, Betty Slade, Sally Aldrich, all kinds of people have been involved in this project. So maybe I should start by going back to this time last year when we were beginning to think about what on earth we were going to do to commemorate this year. And there were a number of challenges. The Westport Historical Society, we have no compelling artifacts from that time period. We have a lot of stories that have been handed down through the generations for which we have no source. So, for example, we have the story of Abner Brownell, and this is a story we haul out every year. Abner Brownell is Westport's Paul Revere. So that's a story that we have. We have a story of Lafayette's soldiers stopping in at a house here at the head of Westport to have refreshments. So that's a good story. But, where did that come from? Is it true? Or is it fiction? Or is it embellished? The town of Westport didn't even exist during the Revolution. But its date of incorporation, which is 1787, suddenly took on a lot more significance for me. So basically, I didn't feel that I had any real knowledge of the Revolutionary War in this area. There was kind of a void that had to be filled. And my interest was really in what was going on in, shall we say, the hearts and minds of the people. Less interested in the battles, I must say, but what was going on? How did the townspeople respond? Who made the decisions? How were the decisions made? How did the Quakers respond to the call to arms, and how did they respond to what was going on around them more broadly? And why, in 1787, did Westport break up with Dartmouth? And in a sense, Westport gained its independence in 1787. So, that was my thought process. And the more I read about this, the more I realized that the American Revolution required every town to make a choice, and every individual, assuming you were a white, pre-white male, to make a choice. And that seemed to be the story that I wanted to pursue. And that is what led me to consider transcribing the town records. So the town records were transcribed, shall we say, by hand in 1888. They discovered these two large books that were bound in rawhide of 400 pages each, and they were in very, very poor condition. So in 1888, they brought in Etta F. Martin, and she was the one who transcribed the 18th century handwriting into her lovely, legible early 20th century writing. And I'd love to find out who Etta Martin was. That would be interesting. So in 1969, the records were put onto microfilm. And then in 2014, the microfilm was digitized by Bob Harding, who was the past president of the Dartmouth Historical and Art Society. And he uploaded the digitized microfilm to the DHAS website, and basically prepared them for me to come in 2026 to transcribe the records. And by transcribe, I really mean convert into, a Word document, a PDF document, any kind of searchable format that we all expect and need to work with these days. So we used a website called From the Page, and I know that the Whaling Museum has used this. That's a crowdsourcing website for transcribers. And we uploaded 126 pages to From the Page. And we had 44 individual transcribers, many of whom I don't know who they are. And before I could say stop, we want to give time for the locals to transcribe. Before I could say that, it was done in a matter of, I don't know, a month. Okay. I was pleased, but also, I really had thought, oh, this is going to be an opportunity for us to do it, but that did not happen. And one of the transcribers, this is an international effort. One of them was over in Australia, and he sent me a message. He is no relative or friend of mine, but I really loved his message. He said, it is just such a rich experience to get a feel for life during this time as expressed through the town meeting records. You have a wonderful resource in these documents, and I feel privileged to have made a small contribution to making them more accessible. So I thought that was really lovely, and how easy that part of the project was. I was really amazed. So what did we find? We have been reading the transcribed records, and we will be sharing more of our discoveries at a program on April 18th at the Westport Library, but I'm going to give you some highlights here. We've learned how town government was forced to evolve really, really quickly. So pre-revolution, 1760s, the town meetings are dealing with very minor issues. They're debating how many schoolmasters they should hire. But by the 1770s, they are responding to some really important and pressing military and financial pressures. And they are also guiding the townsfolk through momentous decisions about the Constitution, for example. We also get a clearer understanding about how the people of Dartmouth viewed themselves. And we kind of know this. Dartmouth was not one community. But what I picked up on was their use of the language of villages. So we have the three villages, the village of Upon-a-Gansett, the village of Acushnet, and the village of Acushnet. So they were seemed to be very distinct communities as far as the town meetings were concerned. We also learned who made the decisions, who was appointed to the many, many committees. And really, I feel like the revolution was a war waged by committee. So we have the Committee of Correspondence, Committee for Continental Association, 21 people on that committee, Constitutional Amendment Committee. They created a committee for everything, and we all know how committees work, but I just found that really, really interesting. There's some quite a few pages in 1777. They decide to impose price controls to curb inflation and to protect the families of soldiers in accordance with the Act to prevent monopoly and oppression. But it's very nicely, before they go into outlining the prices, they preface it with an apology. I'm not sure if this was usual. They apologize to the British. They say, at first, this appears unfriendly to our manufacturing brethren and friends in Great Britain and Ireland. We trust we shall be readily excused by them when they consider that this part of our conduct is wholly designed in our judgment to save both them and us from bondage and slavery. How nice of them to apologize, then do it. So that section gives us a really interesting idea, a sense of what they valued, what the materials, the food, the services, what was important to them. And that's everything from homespun cloth to wood, tanning, curing hides, rum, pine boards, chairs, saddles, the work of ship carpenters, house carpenters, all the way down to something very specific. What was the price of a dinner of boiled and roasted meat? So they capped that at 1 shilling and 4 pence. But the real sort of heart of the story is the Quakers, those people called Quakers. And there's a really interesting little incident. It's an example of something that seems really minor, but it is indicative of a much bigger dynamic that was happening in Old Dartmouth at the time. And this happens in 1783. The town meeting asks the Quakers to explain their reasons for having no more publications set up at their meeting houses. Publications meaning notices of town meetings. And they ask how they choose to be considered by the town as independents of government, or whether they choose to be subject to our Commonwealth. So that's interesting in itself. And so the Quakers present their side of the story, and they say that their meeting houses are their own private property. The notices are counter to our principles respecting military matters, as well as those of marriages. Our manner of worship demands, I'm quoting, our manner of worship demands the most inward and awful attention of mind. All kinds of notifications set up on our doors disturb our meetings. And then they say, we do not think that our request gives any ground for suspicion that we mean to be independent of the government. So that's interesting in itself, something to be looked into. We also see the Quaker influence on the amendments that the town proposes for the Massachusetts Constitution. So they debate the Constitution, and the Quakers they want to add a clause exempting individuals from paying for any minister not of their religion. They want to remove the word defend from the required oath for public officials. They want to remove property qualifications for male voters, which is deemed inconsistent with the liberty we are contending for. And there are a few more amendments that they propose. So throughout these minutes, there seems to be just this thread of growing sense of disparate identities amongst the three villages. In 1786, we have mention of Acushnet village seeking to break away from Dartmouth, and then Acushnet wanting to do the same. And this is, I feel, connected to the East-West split along religious lines. The Westport Dartmouth being predominantly Quaker, the east portion, Fairhaven, New Bedford, Acushnet being Congregationalist, Presbyterian, whatever you want to call it. So I think that just reveals a really interesting hyperlocal story, probably of interest only to me and to a few historians. But I will end by also saying how interesting the language is within the town meeting records. And there's quite a lot of words, interesting words that they use to describe the situation. But the most obvious one that I want to share with you tonight is in 1761, the residents are notified of the town meeting in His Majesty's name, in His Majesty's name. Then by 1779, here's the change. Residents are notified in the name of the government and people of the state of Massachusetts Bay. So, it's really nice to see that in their own words. So I guess I will stop there. I do want to mention that the records, the town meeting records, are up on the Westport Historical Society's website. Pretty easy to find. So you can all read them yourselves. We will have a program on April 18th where we will delve a little bit more deeply into this. And we will also have an exhibition at the Handy House, which will open on June 27th. Thank you.
Okay, and I guess that leaves me. But I'm not mute. There. We'll try again. That leaves me. I was thinking through all this that I was probably imprinted on the revolution back when I was in college, because every April 19th, Paul Revere rode through the campus of Wellesley College saying that the British were coming, waking us up to tell us that the British were coming. So those of you who know me know that I have been interested in burials and remembrances of the people of our town. And I'm very grateful to Naomi Slip, the curator of the Whaling Museum, because she and maybe her minions went through the 17-volume Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors of the Revolution and pulled out all of those who were claimed to be from or were serving Dartmouth. Now, when she was through with that, she had 102 pages, at least I have printed out, of people from Dartmouth who served. Probably 600 names at least. It's a little hard. Some of them get repeated a couple of times. But this is Dartmouth. And in that period, as Jenny mentioned, Old Dartmouth was one very large town. And so it's hard for us to know just where these people were. And that's a problem that I've been wrestling with, because what I'm trying to do is to find burial sites for people who died so that we can, so people who served, who died and are buried in our town, so that we can make sure we honor them for the 250th. The other problem I deal with, in addition to the fact that we've got names and we don't know where they might be, is that Quakers, until actually 1851, forbade putting stone markers on the bodies of dead persons. And so there are a lot of burials, and the tradition for burial in Dartmouth was not to mark graves. And so we have a number of problems as we try to sort this out. But we go ahead doing the best we can, trying to figure out where these people are. We're lucky in that you all know that I did enumerated all the people in almost all the burial grounds in Dartmouth. A few have turned up, and Betty Slade did the same in Westport. So it's been fairly easy for me, given a lot of time when I was on my back, and for Jenny and her committee to pull together. Betty Slade did all of Westport, so we just compare one list against the other, and you pick out the people who are buried in your particular part of the town. The issue, of course, is the other three towns which don't have good inventories of who's buried where. The upshot of all this, and I'm trying not to take too much time, we have found in the 5 towns, as best I can tell you at the moment, and I'm always looking for more, in Dartmouth, 16 men in 9 cemeteries around the town. We do hope eventually to publish all this information. The other thing that's amusing is that there are 2 burials that we are yet seeking. When Mother Nature cleans up her act here and gets rid of all the snow, some of us will go out looking, because 2 people were buried on the Jedediah Sherman's farm on Russell's Mills Road. Mrs. Sherman wanted her brother close by. And that presents a problem, because Jedediah Sherman's farm was 126 acres. It extended from Chase Road to the Pascomanset Park, which is about opposite the Quaker Meeting House. And so it will take a bit of looking, but someone also remarked in publication in 1839 that you could see the graves from the old house. So that limits things quite a bit, and we may be able to find them. I suspect there may not be stones, but who knows? These are the little mysteries that we deal with. Jenny, with her matching, pulled together 16 burials in 11 cemeteries, because again, Betty Slade and her crowd listed all the inhabitants, if you will, all of the people they could identify in the various cemeteries in town. Fairhaven so far is a bit of a problem. We have 5 burials so far in 2 cemeteries. There are no lists really that are helpful, but there is a gal who works for Riverside Cemetery who is trying very hard to help us solve this problem. Fairhaven is trying as best it can. Acushnet, on the other hand, has provided quite a treasure trove, and that's because Ricketson in his 1853 History of New Bedford and Howland in 1907, The History of the Town of Acushnet, published the people who were buried, names of all the people buried in the old cemeteries in town. Old at that time, but by then essentially all Revolutionary War veterans were in the ground. And so all in all, I have 32 in 3 cemeteries, and again, 2 unlocated sites, but we know that they were buried in town. And then there are, on Naomi's list, a certain number of Blacks and Native Americans. And I think I'm going to have to talk more with Jonathan because they exist. They served for Dartmouth, but at least some of them clearly did not live in Dartmouth, but you could send a substitute if you wished, and Dartmouth was low on people to participate in the revolution, and so these people signed up to serve from Dartmouth, even though they might not have been residents, and some of them certainly weren't. There is an Almy on that list, and I would suspect that maybe this was someone who belonged to the Almy family that live out in the far reaches of our town today, but there's no evidence that they are buried in the Almy Cemetery, which is on their property. So I don't know who else might be buried there, but it's an interesting conundrum. It's also clear that those men who served for Dartmouth got coats and they got a bounty, and that may be incentive to serve. Some of them served for a short while. They all signed up for 3 years, and they were generally listed as laborers, which meant perhaps that they were looking for work. We may never know. But at any rate, we're trying, we're beginning. But what about the rest of the people on Naomi's list? I'm not going to say that they all then must have come from New Bedford, because we don't have the faintest notion. The Negroes and Blacks on the list, Negroes and Native Americans on the list certainly did not, all of them, come from this area. And who knows who else might be. But we're working on it. I'm hoping that we can mark all the graves, make sure all the graves that we have found are identified, and hopefully, maybe somebody listening will know of more people whose names we can put together with a burial list in Dartmouth and Westport and see what more we can find. But I think since we're now running well over time, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on all of this because they will all come out sooner or later. We are talking about putting together a walking tour guide or something like that so you can find the people who are out there. I will take pictures when the snow goes away, and we will try to make the information much more available. But in light of the fact that everybody's been sitting for quite a while now, I think I will say enough for tonight.
Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you so much to all of our speakers here. I know we are